Welcome to our Green Chair Conversations Lent series. Today we have Father John Sewell. Father John is a recently retired Episcopal priest. He spent 16 years as rector of St. John's Episcopal Church here in Memphis, Tennessee. His wisdom, education, and wealth of knowledge enlightens and rejuvenates our perspective. In this episode, Father John educates, challenges, and inspires us to incorporate reflection and intentionality, not only into this Lenten season, but also in our lives as well. So let's get to it and meet Father John in the Green Chair. Father John.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for being with us in the Green Chair.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
This is a huge honor. So first of all, I feel like it's been a while since I've seen you, almost a little over a year now.
Yes, it has.
And you were here for our Ash Wednesday service.
I was, and I was honored to be asked to preach at that.
Yes, that was wonderful, and our people loved hearing from that. It was just a really, really great service.
Thank you. I really had a good time. You know, it's the first time I'd ever seen myself preach.
Oh, wow.
I've been at this almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it had never has been taped before like that. And
Yeah.
so it was amazing. I had never seen that before, and I was not unhappy with it.
It was great. It was fantastic. You're here because it was fantastic, because I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the points you made and
Yes,
how you
please.
discussed.
Absolutely.
But before we do, I want us to kind of get to know you a little bit
Okay.
better. So you are recently a retired priest.
I have been retired. It will be 3 years.
Okay.
Well, it is 3 years.
Okay.
At the end of January, 1st of February.
Okay.
It was my 3rd anniversary of retired.
Okay.
And it's been a very interesting experience, and I now have a much more, I think, insight into how disruptive this is. I have come to think of lives being lived in threes,
Okay.
and therefore I call my outfit Act 3.
I like that.
And Act 1 is when you're getting ready, you're learning and you're getting ready to figure out how to be on the stage and so forth and so on. And then you settle on the thing that you're going to do. And then you do it vigorously for Act 2. And then you get to Act 3 and it's over. It's all over. I have preached. That's the last time I've preached.
Oh, wow.
And this is the first time since that day that I've worn a collar.
Wow. Well, I do feel like the world got a little crazy after. I feel like when we were having this conversation and preparing for this interview, I was like, I think that was the last normal event I had been to before the Memphis shut down.
It really did come right after that.
It really was. And so it it feels very nostalgic with you being here today. I'm like, maybe we can set it right by you.
Well, I hope to, we haven't gotten the COVID shots yet, but I hope to,
Yeah.
I hope that to get them soon. We're now
Yes.
in the right age range.
So what we're doing during this series, we're doing a Lent series with Green Chair, and what we're doing through the series is just to talk about Lent, and then prayer specifically. But I would love for your perspective on, and what we're also doing is we're engaging questions with our congregation. So as you know, we have just recently been really leaning into this Lent season with our congregation, and it has been so amazing and so rich. And so I am all about the wisdom and the knowledge of learning and growing and what this season can look like. But one of the questions from our people was, what is Lent and how did it get started?
Well, Lent, the word Lent, comes from a Celtic word for spring. Everywhere else it's called something else, like but in English-speaking places it's called Lent because it falls in the spring. It began as the church here is really a cycle that looks at the life of Jesus. And you commemorate various things, and it's cunningly put together that way. Of course, obviously, the queen of feast is Easter. And Christmas didn't come along for a long time. Christmas was one of the last things we got in the calendar. So in Lent, you were preparing to encounter the resurrection. And it's 40 days, not counting Sundays. Sundays can never be a fast day because it's the day of resurrection. So even if you say, I'm going to fast and Lent, you have a loophole actually on those Sundays, but if you want it. But so it got started, and it goes back, second, third, all of this began to accrue, as it go along. And what happened also is that a lot of people in the 300s, 400s, and 500s centuries, went to Jerusalem. And they would show up in Jerusalem about just before Easter. And they drove the people crazy. So many of them. So they began then to have services at the sites where things happened. And so that what's called the Stations of the Cross is a 14 points of where he stopped in the route to the cross. Now, that's not biblical. It isn't in the Bible at all. But it is historic. I mean, I think it's true.
Yeah.
Because the community never forgot that, see? And so we are really using those events as metaphors, I guess, as a lens to look at this. And so Lent, and then Holy Week, which is the last week of Lent, is that particular time when you are really anticipating what's coming. And so Ash Wednesday starts on Ash Wednesday because it has to be 40 days.
Yes, yeah.
And so, of course, the calendar is a lunar and a solar calendar, so it expands. Christmas is always on the 25th of December, but Easter's not on the same day.
Yes.
It has about a 30-day pattern. It moves back and forth. And a couple of years ago, we had Easter fell on a certain day, and it won't happen again for 200 years. It's just very...
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's what answers your question.
That's perfect. You also said, I thought this was interesting, you said it's important to think about Lent, but it's most important to land in Easter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's the whole point of Lent is this preparation, is this time
and then you encounter the risen Jesus.
Yes.
In all kinds of ways.
Yeah. So you have this quote from Alan Watts.
Yeah.
That's a good quote.
This quote is something that has meant enormous amount to me over the last, 10 years at least, 15 years close. And in it, Alan Watts is a very famous as a Zen Buddhist, actually. But he was, before that, an Episcopal priest. And his early writings are addressing the church. And I came across this book called Behold the Spirit, a study in the necessity of mystical experience. And what he said that grabbed me was this: what people want is to experience God directly. And he went on to say, and if the church does not deal with this, it will degenerate into a political ideology on the left and a mindless fundamentalism on the right. And he wrote that in 1949.
That's so wild.
If you remember, the 50s was a heyday of the church in this country. Nobody would have believed that. But there it is. And that just, it just solidified what I had been moving toward, I think, for many years, is that the only reason the church exists is for people to encounter God directly.
That's good. And so you have this, you had this, and I believe you said it came from a book as well, but you have a illustration that you used at Ash Wednesday. And I still think about this illustration. It really was very powerful to me. You had this illustration of Lent is almost as though pulling out the drawers and emptying it out and then
Everything
deciding.
to the floor.
Yeah, so explain that. I love that.
Well, I got that from a book called To Dance with God. And it's a book written by a Roman Catholic psychologist who talks, and in it she just talks about all kinds of ways that you can use the calendar of the church year to teach and to form and so forth. And it's a splendid book. And it's not old now, but and I have been with her a couple of times when she was speaking. She's very, very good. But she says that Lent is like emptying the drawers of your cabinets and your dresser into the floor, and then you sort of look at that and decide what should go back in and what could go back in and what mustn't go back in.
So practically speaking, then, for our people and for us listening, those of us listening, how would we empty our drawers, so to speak? How would we go about doing that, and how would we go about deciding what goes back into those drawers?
Well, I believe that the most essential thing about one's faith and the most essential piece to begin a life of considered and conscious practice is to be honest with ourselves. And that's one of the hardest things. You know, it just is. And we have a great capacity for deceiving ourselves into thinking that, oh, that didn't really matter, or I'm whatever, I don't have time for that, whatever that means. So I learned a long time ago that I had to be honest in myself. That I remember in college deciding that after I'd had this amazing religious experience when I was a sophomore a long time ago, that I was going to give up lying as a strategy for life. Now, I was really good at it. My mother taught me actually how to do that very well. Since she's deceased, it won't matter if I say this out loud. But the thing was that when she asked you you'd done something wrong, and if you admitted it, then the punishment was, out the window. And so I learned as a child that it was better to take your chances. That's not what she intended to teach.
Yeah.
But it was what I learned. And so I began to do that. I won't say that I don't lie, but it's not real common in my life now. It's taken me a long time, just to suck it up and tell the truth, And it has not made me popular, to be honest.
It's almost like self-reflection, and that's what I enjoy.
Absolutely.
It's almost emptying out these drawers is almost like saying, okay, I need to take time, and I think there's a piece, a layer in that
Oh boy.
we got to have time. I got to take time to evaluate myself, to offer reflection to where am I really, and how am I really doing? Like very, very honestly. I appreciate you challenging us on that.
Well, and in the Christian tradition, there's an ancient tradition that actually began in Ireland, I think, but of having spiritual friends. In the old days, it was called spiritual directors, but that term has been abandoned mostly. And that's simply to have someone that you can trust, and you can tell them anything, and they don't leak. That can take us into hyperdrive, I would say also another discipline of Lent, if we're kind of talking about that, would be keeping a journal. In fact, someone wrote once that they didn't believe that anyone who'd ever made a contribution to the church's teachings and stuff was not a journal keeper. Well, and I've been keeping the journal, not always, but off and on, but mostly for about the last 40 years. I have a box of them. And my administrator at St. John's had my instructions that should something happen to me, that was to be destroyed. You know, think about that.
Yeah.
I don't want. That's not something that will benefit anyone. Because I try to. Also, you always have to write 3 pages. Because you never get honest till the end of the second one.
That's really unique. I really like that. Okay, so another layer to our Lenten series, we're going to be talking about prayer over the weekend, different ways we can be praying. One of the things I wanted us to lean into is about your prayer life. Anything unique to how you pray, how you view prayer? Is there any practice you would encourage, any practice you would challenge us? Just anything prayer related.
I think I left it in my coat, but I was going to show you what's called an Anglican Rosary. It has beads. But unlike the Roman Catholic Rosary, which is focused on the Virgin and so forth, this is you could pray it any way you wanted to with it. So it's got 4 big beads and 7 in between. So my practice has been to pray the Jesus prayer. Now the Jesus prayer comes from the Russian Orthodox tradition. It was, and the guy, his name is the Pilgrim. Nobody knows who he was. Nobody knows his name. And he said that you should start by praying, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. 50,000 times a day. Now, what does that do? People say, well, what's the point of that? Well, the point of that is not that we're doing it for God. The point of it is for us to find ways to calm ourselves down. Because I believe that the goal of life is to calm ourselves down and grow ourselves up.
I like that. Say that one more time. That's really good.
To calm ourselves down and to grow ourselves up. And that comes out of what's called Bowen family systems theory, which is one of my real joys.
Yes. And that is a little bit of what you've been spending some of your time doing in Act 3, correct?
That's two.
Yeah.
We're in the process. Hopefully we'll get there. About every time I get ready to think something's happening, then it snows or it does this or it does that. But I'm looking to start a podcast.
Yeah. That would be fun.
I've never done one, but I think it'd be interesting.
And one of the things you and I were having a conversation about is just kind of offering, again, that word is not really considered spiritual director or spiritual direction. We're using different language now, but essentially doing some of that with
oh yes,
yeah, with other people.
In my last years at St. John, at one year, I think I was seeing about 35 people a week.
And it's about distinguishing calling, correct? It's about finding what our calling is, purposes.
That and to just talk about whatever matters.
Yeah.
So it has a bit of a therapeutic kind of notion to it, but it's more than that. The person who agrees to become the mentor, if you will, makes a commitment to God and to himself or herself that I will take delight in this person. I'll give you an example. Years ago, one day I was walking toward the Parish Life Center outside, and my cell phone rang, and I answered it. I didn't know this person. It was a woman, and she said to me, "Would you see my son?" And she told me how she knew of me and who had told her to do that. And she said he's just got lots and lots of problems and so forth and so on. I said, well, I'll call him. We'll see, you know. So I did call him. And then I said to him, your mother called and she wants me to fix you. I've learned over the years, if you can absolutely be outrageously truthful, that will get you somewhere. I said, now, I told her I couldn't do that, but I said, I'm happy to meet you. And he came to see me. And we talked for about an hour and a half. And he had markedly been unwilling to see a therapist. Okay. And so about the end of that, he just burst into tears. Because he'd been carrying this sack of rocks. And he was in his middle 20s at the time. And I worked with him over the next few years. I don't see him much anymore, but we worked a lot for a period. So that was kind of an unusual way. Yeah. But I decided every time I would see him, I would grin. I would sometimes position myself outside on the bench so that we drove in and parked and came across toward the entrance. I would be reading, and I of course knew he was coming, and then I would look up and grin. Because the very fact of us taking delight in someone, I believe, is healing. It's maybe even life-producing. Many people have never had anyone be delighted that they are. You know?
Wow, that's powerful. So circling back a little bit on Lent and prayer and practices, what would any final encouragements, what would any reminders that you would have for us today that to just leave us with as we're in the middle of this Lenten journey, as we're trying to navigate this, as we're trying to go about this journey, what would you want to leave us with?
Prayer is simply a conversation with God. When I was in college, I had a profound religious experience when I was 19. And my life has never really been the same since. And after that experience, I discovered that my stream of consciousness, the inner conversation in your head, I was talking to God most of the time, a lot of the time. And ever so often, a thought would come to me that I had never thought of before or whatever, and I would sometimes, for example, I was in Washington at a conference, and on the first day of the conference, a voice spoke my voice spoke to me and said, not out loud, obviously, but in my head said, "Today begins the third act of your life." And that's all they said. They said nothing else. It took me 3 years to figure that out. And what I learned was I'm at the end of Act 2. And I've got to give all that up. And so that's been sort of painful, but you just have, God is always more interested in talking to us than we are to talk to Him.
And you had this quote that I thought was so powerful is, if we are willing, God will talk to us.
Oh, absolutely.
But, there's the but most of us aren't willing.
Oh, that's right.
And I think then for us is trying to build in that space. I think you said that, God is willing to speak. And that's what I have so loved. And one of the lessons pulling from hearing you speak and even in our conversations is just how reflective you are and how you cause us to have that self-evaluation, that reflection, that space to be still, to be quiet, and to be with God and to allow that space because God wants to meet us.
And to assume that God is going to talk to you.
Yes.
And you have to learn how to discern it.
Yes.
The texture,
Yeah, yeah.
I have come to believe that when people, when a thought comes to me I've never had before, that I'm aware of, or if something comes to me that contradicts what I thought, I need to pay attention. Those are sort of, there are a few little things like that, criteria, I guess, that I would share with people, you've got to learn to do that. So what are some of the Lent, well, there's a couple of things you could do for Lent. Don't turn on the radio on the way to work. Leave it on. Most of us have a computer in our workspace. I can share some places with you, some sites there. There's an Episcopal convent, nuns that they do. Yes, we do have nuns who they do morning prayer and evening prayer every day. All you got to do is fire up the computer and add prayer to what they're doing, and it's a painless way to start your day in 7 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
So I have a shtick piece which I called "Praying the iPhone," of ways that you could use the iPhone to promote your spiritual growth. And that was kind of fun. But there are lots of resources that are available to us in ways we never have had before.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you're saying utilize those in order to propel us to listen, in order to propel us to pray.
And there will be some fun stuff out of that, let me tell you.
Yeah. I really like that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for being here with us in the Green Chair.
I love coming here.
This is such a blessing for us. Thank you, Father John. We so appreciate you being here. And that is a wrap for our Green Chair conversation with Father John. Thank you so much for being here with us. Remember, today's conversation doesn't have to end here. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts about today's conversation, or even topics or people you want to hear from. So please, please, please feel free to email me. Also, we would love for you to take a moment and encourage someone today by sharing this conversation with a friend. You can also watch any previous conversations at hopechurchmemphis.com/GCC or on YouTube, as well as listen on any podcast apps. We love you guys, and I'll see you next week.